There are places on Earth that hold secrets older than history itself. The Tibetan Plateau is one of them. Rising over 4,500 meters above sea level, this land is often called the roof of the world. But beyond its breathtaking landscapes and extreme climate, Tibet hides something even more fascinating: its people. Tibetans have lived here for thousands of years, thriving in conditions that would make survival nearly impossible for most. Their DNA holds secrets that challenge everything we know about human evolution. And the deeper we look, the more mysterious their origins become. For most humans, high altitudes bring a host of problems: low oxygen levels, altitude sickness, and a struggle for survival. But Tibetans? They seem almost unaffected. Scientists long believed that, like other high-altitude populations, Tibetans simply adapted over time. But when researchers started studying their DNA, they found something unexpected. Unlike the Andeans of South America or the Ethiopian highlanders of Africa, who have slowly adjusted to thin air over generations, Tibetans have something entirely unique in their genetic code. They don't just cope with low oxygen, they thrive in it. And the reason why is still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in human genetics. At the heart of this puzzle is a single gene, EPAS1. This gene plays a critical role in how the body responds to low oxygen levels. In most humans, when oxygen is scarce, the body compensates by producing more red blood cells. But too many red blood cells can make the blood thick and slow circulation, leading to serious health problems. Yet, Tibetans have a version of EPAS1 that prevents this overreaction. Their bodies use oxygen more efficiently, without the harmful side effects. What's even stranger is where this gene comes from. It didn't evolve slowly over time like other adaptations. Instead, its origins point to something truly unexpected: an ancient, extinct human species. The closest match to the Tibetan EPAS1 gene isn't found in modern human populations. It's found in Denisovans, an elusive cousin of Neanderthals who lived over 50,000 years ago. Fossils of Denisovans have only been found in Siberia, yet their DNA somehow made its way into the Tibetan gene pool. That means, at some point in the distant past, the ancestors of Tibetans interbred with Denisovans, inheriting this life-saving adaptation. But here's the real mystery: no Denisovan remains have ever been discovered in Tibet. So how did this crucial gene end up in the Tibetan population? Did Denisovans once live on the plateau, their bones still waiting to be found beneath the ice and rock? Or did early humans pick up this genetic gift somewhere else before making their way to Tibet? The answer remains unknown. This is just the beginning of what Tibetan DNA has to reveal. Their genes don't just hold clues to high-altitude survival. They could unlock secrets about ancient human migration, lost civilizations, and even our own evolutionary past. If a single gene could rewrite what we thought we knew about early humans, what other mysteries are still hidden in Tibetan DNA? For centuries, the Tibetan Plateau was considered one of the last frontiers of human settlement. Towering mountains, brutal cold, and oxygen levels that would leave most gasping for breath. It was a place few could survive. But archaeological evidence tells a different story. Humans didn't just reach Tibet, they made it their home. The real question is, who were these first Tibetans? And where did they come from? The first traces of human presence on the Tibetan Plateau date back over 40,000 years. But here's the problem: these early settlers should not have been able to survive. The last glacial maximum, the coldest period of the Ice Age, was still in full force. Yet, evidence suggests that humans were already braving the extreme conditions of Tibet. The mystery deepens when genetic studies reveal something unexpected. Modern Tibetans don't trace their entire ancestry back to these early pioneers. Instead, their DNA tells a story of multiple migrations, waves of people arriving from different parts of Asia, each leaving their mark on the Tibetan gene pool. One of the most significant genetic signatures in modern Tibetans points to an ancient group from northern China. These were the Neolithic farmers of the Yellow River Basin, people who cultivated millet and domesticated animals around 7,000 years ago. As their population grew, they began to spread, and some of them made their way westward, toward the high-altitude lands of Tibet. But here's where things get strange. Genetic evidence also shows a much older lineage, one that doesn't match the Neolithic farmers at all. This lineage is rare, found only in Tibet and a few scattered regions of South Asia. Could this be the genetic echo of the first Tibetan settlers, the ones who arrived tens of thousands of years earlier? If so, where did they come from? Some researchers believe these ancient Tibetans may have migrated from the south, following a route through the Himalayas. Others suggest a connection to Central Asia, pointing to genetic links with ancient populations in present-day Pakistan. But the truth is, no single theory fully explains the complex ancestry of Tibetans. Their DNA holds the footprints of multiple migrations, each wave of newcomers shaping and redefining what it meant to be Tibetan. Yet, through all these changes, one thing remained constant: Tibetans never left. Unlike other early human populations that faded or were replaced, Tibetans endured. Their ability to thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth ensured their survival, and their DNA became a time capsule of ancient migrations, forgotten civilizations, and the untold history of humanity. What other secrets are buried in the genetic code of Tibetans? And how many pieces of their past are still waiting to be uncovered? Tibetans have lived at extreme altitudes for thousands of years, thriving in conditions that most humans would find unbearable. But how? The answer lies deep within their DNA. Unlike lowland populations, Tibetans have a genetic adaptation that allows them to survive and even flourish in an environment where oxygen levels are 40% lower than at sea level. This adaptation isn't just unusual. It's almost unheard of in human evolution. One of the most astonishing genetic discoveries in recent history is the EPAS1 gene, often called the superathlete gene. It regulates the body's response to low oxygen. But here's where it gets interesting. This gene is not entirely human. Scientists found that the unique version of EPAS1 found in Tibetans comes from an extinct group of humans, the Denisovans. These mysterious relatives of Neanderthals lived in Asia thousands of years ago before disappearing. At some point in history, Denisovans and the ancestors of modern Tibetans interbred, passing down this rare gene that would later become crucial for survival at high altitudes. But why is this gene so important? In most humans, low oxygen triggers an overproduction of red blood cells, thickening the blood and leading to dangerous conditions like chronic mountain sickness. Tibetans, however, have a built-in advantage. Their version of EPAS1 prevents excessive red blood cell production, allowing them to use oxygen more efficiently without the negative effects seen in other high-altitude populations. This is why Sherpas, who share the same adaptation, can climb Everest with minimal oxygen assistance, while outsiders struggle. What's even more surprising is how quickly this gene spread. Evolution usually takes tens of thousands of years, but the EPAS1 gene became widespread among Tibetans in just a few thousand years. It's one of the fastest genetic adaptations ever recorded. This rapid change suggests extreme selective pressure. Those without the gene simply couldn't survive at high altitudes. Yet, the Denisovan connection raises even more questions. Why is this gene almost non-existent in other human populations? And how much Denisovan DNA do Tibetans actually have? While Neanderthal genes are found in all non-African populations, Denisovan genes are far rarer, making their legacy in Tibetans even more unique. Some researchers believe this could mean there were once unknown groups of Denisovans living closer to Tibet, interacting more frequently with early humans. The discovery of the EPAS1 gene is just the beginning. If one life-saving gene came from Denisovans, could there be others? Could Tibetans hold the key to understanding how ancient human species influenced modern survival? The deeper we look into their DNA, the more it challenges everything we thought we knew about human evolution. For centuries, Tibetans have lived in isolation on the highest plateau on Earth, yet their DNA tells a story of ancient migrations, lost civilizations, and connections to populations far beyond the Himalayas. While most people assume Tibetans descended solely from East Asian groups, genetic research has uncovered a far more complex ancestry, one that challenges long-standing theories about human migration in Asia. Modern Tibetans share a deep genetic link with the ancient populations of the Yellow River Basin. Around 9,000 years ago, early agricultural societies flourished in northern China, and it was from this region that the ancestors of Tibetans likely began their journey toward the plateau. But something unexpected happened along the way. Unlike their lowland relatives, Tibetans' genetic makeup was shaped by a distinct group of early humans, who left behind traces of their existence but little else. Recent studies have revealed that Tibetans carry DNA from a deeply divergent human lineage, one that doesn't match any known ancient population. This means that thousands of years ago, before the rise of Tibetan civilization, an unknown group of humans mixed with the ancestors of Tibetans. Who were they? Some researchers speculate they might have been an isolated branch of early East Asians, while others believe they could be remnants of a lost population that once roamed the vast lands of Central Asia. What makes this even more intriguing is that traces of this mysterious ancestry are found only in Tibetans and a few neighboring ethnic groups. Unlike the widespread genetic influence of Neanderthals or Denisovans, this lineage seems to have been unique to the Himalayan region. This suggests that these ancient people were among the first to reach the Tibetan Plateau, surviving the harsh conditions long before the Neolithic migrations from China. But genetic history isn't just about where people came from, it's about how they interacted. While Tibetans are closely related to northern East Asians, their DNA also shows ancient connections to populations in South Asia. Certain mitochondrial haplogroups, passed down exclusively through the maternal line, reveal genetic ties between Tibetans and groups in Nepal, Bhutan, and even parts of Pakistan. This means that despite the formidable barriers of the Himalayas, human movement and interaction across the region were more frequent than once thought. Perhaps the most surprising discovery is that Tibetans have maintained a high level of genetic continuity for over 4,000 years. While many populations in Asia experienced large-scale migrations and genetic shifts, the core genetic identity of Tibetans has remained remarkably stable. This suggests that once their ancestors reached the plateau, they became largely self-sustaining, with limited outside influence. Tibetan DNA is like a time capsule, preserving clues about ancient human migration and survival. The more we uncover, the more we realize that the history of Tibet is not just a story of one people, but of multiple groups coming together, shaping the identity of a civilization that continues to thrive in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. The Tibetan Plateau is one of the most extreme environments on Earth, yet Tibetans have not only survived but thrived here for thousands of years. Their secret, a unique genetic adaptation that allows them to function in conditions that would leave most people gasping for breath. But what's truly fascinating is where this adaptation came from. It's not just human evolution at work, but something far more ancient. Tibetans carry a genetic mutation in the EPAS1 gene, often called the superathlete gene, which helps regulate oxygen levels in the blood. Unlike most people, Tibetans don't rely on producing excess red blood cells to compensate for low oxygen. Instead, their bodies have evolved a far more efficient system, allowing them to maintain normal oxygen levels without the risk of thickened blood, which can lead to life-threatening complications at high altitudes. But here's where the mystery deepens. This crucial gene isn't just unique. It seems to have originated from an extinct group of ancient humans. Genetic studies suggest that Tibetans inherited this adaptation from Denisovans, a mysterious hominin species that lived in Asia tens of thousands of years ago. Unlike Neanderthals, whose DNA is found in many modern humans, Denisovans left their genetic mark only in certain populations, mainly Tibetans and a few other high-altitude groups. This means that at some point in ancient history, the ancestors of Tibetans interbred with Denisovans, acquiring a genetic advantage that would later become essential for survival on the plateau. But why Tibetans? The EPAS1 mutation is found in over 75% of modern Tibetans, yet it's almost non-existent in lowland East Asian populations. This suggests that natural selection played a powerful role in spreading this trait. Over generations, those with the Denisovan gene had a higher survival rate in the harsh Himalayan environment, passing it down until it became a defining characteristic of the Tibetan people. This discovery rewrites our understanding of human evolution. It proves that modern humans didn't just evolve in isolation but acquired key traits from other ancient species, traits that directly shaped their ability to inhabit extreme environments. In a way, Denisovans live on through Tibetans, their genetic legacy still influencing human survival in one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. But this revelation leads to even bigger questions. If the EPAS1 gene was inherited from Denisovans, what other genetic secrets might Tibetans hold? Could there be undiscovered traits that further explain their resilience? And most intriguingly, what else did our ancestors inherit from the lost human species that once roamed the earth? Tibetans are not just unique because of their extraordinary adaptation to high altitudes. Their entire genetic history is a puzzle that scientists are still trying to piece together. While their closest relatives are other East Asian populations, their DNA reveals something unexpected, an ancient genetic split that suggests Tibetans followed a different evolutionary path long before settling on the plateau. The mystery begins with the two major ancestral lineages that shaped Tibetans. One branch connects them to early East Asian farmers from the Yellow River Basin, the same population that gave rise to the Han Chinese. The other, however, is far older, tracing back to a group that lived on the plateau tens of thousands of years ago. This ancient population, likely isolated for thousands of years, left behind genetic signatures that are still present in modern Tibetans. What's even more intriguing is the way these two lineages merged. DNA evidence suggests that around 5,100 years ago, a major migration event brought Yellow River farmers into the highlands, where they mixed with the plateau's original inhabitants. This fusion of populations didn't just shape Tibetan culture and language. It played a crucial role in their genetic adaptation to extreme altitudes. Over generations, natural selection favored individuals who carried the beneficial traits from both lineages, allowing them to survive in the thin air of the Himalayas. But this raises an even bigger question. Who were the ancient plateau dwellers that predated this migration? Their genetic traces suggest they were distinct from both East Asians and Central Asians, making them a population unlike any other. Some researchers believe they may have been among the earliest modern humans to reach the region, long before the rise of major civilizations in China and India. If true, this would mean Tibetans carry the DNA of one of the oldest continuous human populations on Earth. The discovery of these two ancestral sources challenges everything we thought we knew about human migration. It suggests that Tibetans didn't just inherit their high-altitude adaptations from a single source, but from a complex process of ancient mixing and natural selection. Their DNA holds evidence of a lost people, an unknown chapter in human history that is only now being uncovered. But the mystery doesn't end here. What happened to the original plateau dwellers? Did they disappear? Or do their descendants still exist in other parts of Asia? And if Tibetans carry these deep genetic roots, could they hold more secrets about the survival of early humans in extreme environments? Tibetans have survived for thousands of years in one of the most extreme environments on Earth, but their ability to thrive at high altitudes is more than just a result of human endurance. It's written in their DNA. Unlike other populations, Tibetans don't experience chronic mountain sickness despite living in oxygen-starved conditions. This isn't just a biological advantage. It's a genetic breakthrough that has reshaped what we know about human adaptation. At the heart of this adaptation is a gene called EPAS1, sometimes referred to as the superathlete gene. But what makes this gene truly astonishing is its origin. Unlike most human genetic traits, EPAS1 appears to have come from an ancient human relative, the Denisovans. These mysterious hominins lived in Asia thousands of years ago before vanishing, leaving little behind except for traces of their DNA in certain populations. Tibetans, however, inherited a unique version of EPAS1 that is almost non-existent in other groups. This genetic inheritance is nothing short of remarkable. While most people at high altitudes compensate for low oxygen by producing more red blood cells, this can lead to thickened blood, high blood pressure, and serious health risks. Tibetans, on the other hand, have evolved a completely different response. Thanks to their Denisovan inherited EPAS1, their bodies regulate oxygen intake more efficiently without overproducing red blood cells. It's an evolutionary shortcut that allows them to live at elevations where others would struggle to survive. But here's where it gets even stranger. Studies show that the frequency of the EPAS1 gene in Tibetans has skyrocketed over the past few thousand years. This suggests a case of rapid natural selection, one of the fastest ever recorded in humans. In just a few thousand generations, this gene spread through the Tibetan population, giving them an unprecedented survival advantage in the thin air of the Himalayas. Yet, this discovery leads to more questions than answers. How did Tibetans acquire this Denisovan gene when Denisovans themselves disappeared long before Tibetans became a distinct population? Did an ancient interbreeding event introduce this trait into early Tibetan ancestors? And if so, why do Tibetans have this adaptation while most other modern humans do not? The Denisovan connection challenges what we thought we knew about human evolution. It suggests that the survival of an entire population can depend on genetic traces from an extinct species. But it also raises the possibility that other hidden genetic adaptations could be buried in the DNA of different populations around the world, waiting to be discovered. Tibetan DNA holds another mystery, one that isn't just about adaptation but about migration, ancestry, and the very origins of the Tibetan people. For years, researchers debated where Tibetans came from. Were they descendants of ancient East Asian populations? Did they arrive from Central Asia? Or could their roots stretch even further back, beyond recorded history? Recent genetic research has finally provided an answer, and it's far more complex than anyone expected. Tibetans are not the result of a single migration event, but a fusion of multiple ancient populations. Studies on mitochondrial DNA, passed down through the maternal line, reveal two distinct ancestral groups. The first came from northern East Asia, likely the Yellow River region, arriving during the Neolithic period. These early settlers brought agriculture, language, and culture that shaped Tibetan civilization. But the second group is even more intriguing, a much older population, possibly dating back 40,000 years. These people were already living on the plateau long before the rise of modern civilizations. This means Tibetans are not newcomers to their homeland. They are, in many ways, the original Highlanders, carrying the genetic imprint of some of the earliest human settlers in Asia. Their DNA shows a rare combination of continuity and change. Some lineages have remained almost unchanged for tens of thousands of years, while others reveal traces of interactions with nearby populations. Over time, these groups merged, forming the genetic foundation of the modern Tibetan people. But there's a twist. Despite their deep roots, Tibetans remained surprisingly isolated for much of their history. Unlike other regions of Asia, which saw waves of migration and conquest, the Tibetan Plateau acted as a genetic fortress. Its harsh environment kept outside influences minimal, preserving the unique genetic makeup of its people. However, this doesn't mean Tibet was completely cut off. Ancient DNA evidence suggests that Tibetans had sporadic but significant interactions with their neighbors, including early Nepalese and Central Asian groups. Some genetic signatures even hint at connections with populations from the Indian subcontinent, raising fascinating questions about early trade routes and cultural exchanges. Perhaps the most striking discovery is that Tibetans today still carry a strong genetic link to their ancestors from thousands of years ago. While most human populations have undergone significant genetic shifts due to migrations and mixing, Tibetans remain remarkably similar to their ancient counterparts. This suggests a rare case of long-term genetic stability, something almost unheard of in human history. The Tibetan genome tells a story of survival, endurance, and mystery. It shows that their ancestors were among the first to conquer the most extreme environments on Earth, carving out a life in the thin air of the plateau. And yet, despite their genetic isolation, they have retained connections to an ancient world that is only now being uncovered. Tibetan DNA isn't just a window into the past. It's also a glimpse into the incredible adaptations that have allowed Tibetans to thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. While most people struggle with altitude sickness at elevations above 2,500 meters, Tibetans live and work at heights exceeding 4,000 meters with no difficulty. But what makes them so different? The answer lies in their genes, and the discoveries are rewriting what we know about human evolution. One of the most extraordinary findings is the role of the EPAS1 gene, often called the superathlete gene. This gene regulates the body's response to low oxygen levels, preventing excessive red blood cell production, which can lead to dangerous conditions like chronic mountain sickness. Unlike lowland populations, whose bodies compensate for hypoxia by thickening the blood, Tibetans have evolved a more efficient system, one that allows them to use oxygen far more effectively without the negative side effects. Even more astonishing is the origin of this genetic adaptation. Studies reveal that the EPAS1 variant in Tibetans didn't come from modern humans at all. It was inherited from an ancient hominin species, the Denisovans. These mysterious relatives of Neanderthals lived in Asia tens of thousands of years ago, and at some point, their genes entered the Tibetan ancestral population. Over generations, natural selection favored this adaptation, allowing Tibetans to develop an unmatched resilience to high-altitude living. But EPAS1 isn't the only genetic advantage Tibetans have. The EPAS1 gene also plays a crucial role, fine-tuning how their bodies regulate oxygen. This gene helps maintain a balance between red blood cell production and oxygen transport, ensuring that Tibetans can function normally even in environments where oxygen levels are 40% lower than at sea level. Other genes, such as ANGPT1 and VEGFA, contribute to improved blood vessel development, further enhancing oxygen delivery to tissues. These genetic modifications work together, giving Tibetans a biological edge that other populations simply don't have. What's truly remarkable is how quickly these adaptations took hold. Genetic studies suggest that these altitude-related changes emerged in Tibetans within less than 3,000 years, an incredibly short time in evolutionary terms. Normally, such significant adaptations take tens of thousands of years to spread through a population, but the extreme conditions of the Tibetan Plateau created an intense selection pressure, accelerating the process. These findings challenge traditional views of human evolution, proving that natural selection can act with astonishing speed when survival depends on it. They also raise deeper questions about how humans interact with their environment. Could similar rapid adaptations be happening in other extreme environments, like the Arctic or deep jungles? Tibetan DNA has provided one of the most compelling examples of how humans can evolve to overcome nature's toughest challenges. And yet, there is still so much to uncover. Could other unknown genetic factors be at play? What else might ancient DNA reveal about the hidden history of Tibet's people? The search for answers continues. For centuries, the Tibetan Plateau has been a place of mystery, its people thriving in conditions that would leave most gasping for air. But beyond the well-documented genetic adaptations lies a deeper enigma. Tibetans carry traces of a migration history that reshaped their DNA over thousands of years. Where did they truly come from? What ancient populations contributed to their unique genetic makeup? The answers challenge long-held assumptions and reveal a complex story of survival, adaptation, and evolution. Recent genetic studies show that Tibetans share a common ancestry with East Asian populations, particularly those from the Yellow River Basin. Thousands of years ago, during the Neolithic period, groups from northern China migrated westward, eventually settling in Tibet. But their journey was anything but straightforward. Along the way, they mixed with older populations, some of whom may have arrived on the plateau tens of thousands of years earlier. One of the biggest surprises in Tibetan DNA is the discovery of an ancient maternal lineage that dates back over 40,000 years. The presence of the M62 haplogroup suggests that some of the earliest settlers of the Tibetan Plateau were part of a deeply rooted East Asian population. Unlike later migrations, which brought farming and new technologies, these early inhabitants were hunter-gatherers, navigating the plateau long before recorded history. But the genetic puzzle doesn't end there. While Tibetans are most closely related to East Asians, certain genetic markers hint at influences from Central and even South Asia. Ancient DNA samples from Nepal and Pakistan reveal shared maternal lineages with Tibetans, particularly in southwestern regions like Ngari and Shigatse. This suggests that Tibet was not as isolated as once believed. Trade routes, cultural exchanges, and even intermarriage may have shaped the Tibetan gene pool in ways that history alone cannot explain. The Tubo period, 1,400 to 1,100 years ago, marked a turning point in Tibetan genetic history. As the Tibetan Empire expanded, so did its interactions with neighboring civilizations. Genetic evidence from this period shows a shift. Populations in Tibet became more homogenized, likely due to increased internal movement and cultural unification under the empire. During this time, Tibetans also developed a stronger genetic distinction from other East Asian groups, solidifying their unique identity. Despite all these findings, some mysteries remain unsolved. One of the biggest questions in Tibetan genetics is the exact timeline of their adaptation to high altitudes. While studies suggest that the EPAS1 allele, linked to survival in low-oxygen environments, became widespread in the last 3,000 years, the precise moment of its introduction is still unknown. Did it enter the Tibetan gene pool through a single event, or was it the result of multiple waves of migration? As genetic technology advances, scientists are getting closer to answering these questions. With each new discovery, the story of the Tibetan people becomes more intricate, revealing a history that stretches beyond written records. The secrets hidden in their DNA tell of endurance, migration, and the remarkable ability of humans to adapt to the most extreme environments on Earth.